The summer of 1995 had been particularly sweltering in Miami. Heat rose in visible shimmering waves from the asphalt of Coral Gables, a quiet suburb where colonial homes stood like silent sentinels under the relentless Florida sun. In one of these houses, painted a soft cream with navy blue shutters, lived the Hernandez family. Gabriel Hernandez, a respected 42-year-old accountant who had emigrated from Mexico 2 decades prior, was known for his punctuality and dedication. His wife, Elena, 38, was a primary school teacher at the local school, beloved by her students for her infinite patience and warm smile. Their children, 12-year-old Gabriel and 9-year-old Sofía, were exemplary students who filled the house with laughter and the occasional debate over who would choose that night's television program. On the morning of June 17th, neighbors noticed something was amiss. The Sunday paper was piling up on the driveway. The family's silver Honda Accord remained parked where it had been the previous Friday. The curtains, which Elena always opened promptly at 7 o'clock a.m., stayed drawn. "They probably went to visit relatives," remarked Marta Winters, the next-door neighbor, as she watered her petunias. But when a week passed with no sign of life, Marta finally called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived at the Hernandez residence with a growing sense of unease. There was something about the silence of the house that felt unnatural. Birds chirped. Neighbors' sprinklers misted perfectly manicured lawns, yet the Hernandez house seemed frozen in time. "Hello, Miami Police Department," he called out, knocking firmly on the front door. Silence. With the proper authorization, he entered the home. What he found deeply unsettled him. There were no signs of a struggle. The dining room table was set for dinner with 4 place settings. In the kitchen, a pot of what looked to have been stew had boiled completely dry. The television in the living room was off. The beds were made. The children's school backpacks hung on hooks by the back door. Elena's toothbrush was still damp. It was as if the family had been snatched away in the middle of their daily routine. "It's like they vanished into thin air," Officer Ramirez muttered to his partner as they swept the house for clues. In the days that followed, the disappearance of the Hernandez family became national news. Their smiling faces appeared on the nightly news, on missing posters, and on the front pages of local papers. Search parties were formed. Friends, colleagues, and relatives were interviewed. But no one had any answers. No one had noticed anything unusual. No one could imagine why this model family would simply disappear without a trace. Meanwhile, the Hernandez house stood empty, a silent shell holding secrets that no one could decipher. As months turned into years, the intensity of the search waned. The story faded from the headlines. Life in Coral Gables went on, but within the walls of that colonial house, a terrifying secret lay dormant, waiting to be discovered. A secret that would forever change the lives of everyone involved, and that wouldn't come to light for another 9 years. Not until a nurse named Amber Collins bought the house for a surprisingly low price and began to hear inexplicable sounds coming from the basement walls. 9 years had passed since the mysterious disappearance of the Hernandez family. The house had remained vacant for so long it had become something of a local urban legend. Neighborhood kids called it the ghost house, daring each other to ring the doorbell on Halloween. Properties around it were bought and sold, but no one seemed interested in the colonial home with its inexplicable history. Until Amber Collins arrived. At 34, Amber was looking for a fresh start. A dedicated nurse at Jackson Memorial Hospital, she had just finalized a painful divorce after discovering her husband of 10 years had been unfaithful. When her real estate agent showed her the property in Coral Gables, he briefly mentioned the story of the family who had vanished, but framed it as an unfortunate incident from long ago. The price is incredible, the agent insisted, avoiding eye contact with the dusty corners of the house. With a good cleaning and some fresh paint, it'll be like new. Amber, practical by nature and in need of a distraction, saw an opportunity. Sometimes new beginnings come in unexpected packages, she thought as she signed the purchase papers in February of 2004. The first few weeks in the house were a flurry of renovations. Amber hired painters, cleaners, and a landscaper to revive the overgrown garden. Slowly the house began to come back to life. The navy blue shutters were repainted, the floorboards polished to their original sheen, and the kitchen cabinets replaced. It was during her third week in the house that Amber first noticed something strange. She had finished a particularly grueling night shift and had fallen asleep on the living room sofa. She was jolted awake at 3:17 a.m., unsure of what had woken her. Then she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound like scratching coming from somewhere beneath her. Probably mice, she murmured to herself, making a mental note to call an exterminator in the morning. But the next night the sound returned. This time it wasn't scratching. It was something that sounded unsettlingly like a muffled sob. Amber sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She grabbed the baseball bat from her closet, a habit she'd picked up while living alone, and crept slowly down the stairs. The sound seemed to be coming from the basement. Amber had never been fond of the space. Despite her renovations elsewhere, the basement remained a dark, damp place she used mostly for storage. She flipped on the light and descended the creaking wooden steps. The basement was silent and seemingly empty, save for some moving boxes and old furniture. Amber walked the perimeter slowly, occasionally knocking on the walls with her knuckles. And then she heard it again, a faint sound like a moan that seemed to come directly from the east wall. "Hello?" Amber called out, feeling immediately foolish for talking to a wall. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Amber moved closer, pressing her ear against the cool surface. For a moment she heard nothing but the thumping of her own heart. But then, so softly she almost thought she'd imagined it, she heard a voice. "Help us!" Amber stumbled back in horror, tripping over a box and falling to the floor. Her rational mind tried to process what she had just heard. It had to be her imagination. Perhaps the stress of the divorce, the night shifts, and the new house was finally getting to her. But a part of her knew what she had heard was real. Over the next few days, Amber tried to go about her life. She worked her shifts, continued unpacking boxes, and even had a few colleagues over for a small housewarming party. But every night she would return to the basement, press her ear against that wall, and wait. Sometimes she heard nothing. Other times she would catch fragments of sound, murmurs, sighs, what seemed to be a softly hummed melody. One night, determined to prove she wasn't losing her mind, Amber brought a glass down to the basement. She pressed its rim against the wall, placing her ear on the bottom as she'd seen in movies. This time she heard it clearly. "Please, if anyone is there, help us. We are the Hernandez family." The glass slipped from her trembling hands and shattered on the concrete floor. Amber scrambled up the stairs, grabbed her phone, and with shaking fingers dialed 911. "Miami Police Department, what's your emergency?" "My name is Amber Collins," she said, her voice trembling. "I live at 1432 Palmetto Avenue in Coral Gables, the house where the Hernandez family disappeared 9 years ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I think they're alive, and I think they're trapped inside the walls of my house." As she waited for the police to arrive, Amber sat on her front steps, hugging her knees to her chest despite the humid Miami night. She wondered if they would think she was crazy. She wondered if she had really heard what she thought she'd heard. But most of all, She wondered how it was possible for a family to be trapped inside the walls of a house for 9 years without anyone knowing. What Amber didn't know was that she was about to uncover one of the darkest secrets the quiet community of Coral Gables had ever held, and that the person responsible was closer than anyone could have ever imagined. When officers Rivera and Morales arrived at Amber's home, their expressions betrayed their skepticism. They'd taken strange calls before, but this one seemed particularly far-fetched. A family missing for 9 years, suddenly reappearing inside the walls of a house, sounded like the plot of a low-budget horror movie. "Ms. Collins," Officer Rivera began, his tone professional but distant. "We understand you're concerned. But you have to understand, the Hernandez disappearance was investigated exhaustively at the time." Amber, her hands still shaking, led them to the basement. "I know how this sounds. I'm a nurse, officer. I work with facts, with science. I'm not the type to imagine things, but I swear to you I heard voices and they specifically said the name Hernandez." The basement was silent as they descended. The bare bulb hanging from the ceiling cast long shadows across the concrete walls. Amber pointed toward the east wall. "From there. The sounds are coming from there." The officers exchanged a look but approached the indicated wall. Officer Morales rapped his knuckles against the surface, listening to the solid thud it produced. "Seems normal," he commented, but he continued to examine the wall more closely. That's when he noticed something, a slight discrepancy in the pattern of the paint, a nearly imperceptible line that formed a rectangle. "Get a flashlight," he asked Amber, who quickly ran upstairs and returned with one. Under the focused beam, the anomaly became clearer. The section of the wall looked as if it had been cut out and then meticulously sealed back in place. Near the floor, tiny, almost invisible holes had been drilled through the surface. "Ventilation holes," Officer Rivera murmured, his skepticism vanishing. He pulled out his radio. "We need backup and equipment at 11432 Palmetto Avenue. Possible hostage situation." The next 45 minutes were a blur of frantic activity. More officers arrived, along with emergency technicians and a specialized team for controlled demolition. Amber watched from the stairs, her mind oscillating between the hope of having saved lives and the terror of what they might find. "Ms. Collins, we need you to go upstairs," a female officer told her kindly but firmly. "For your own safety." From the kitchen, Amber heard the sounds of demolition, the whine of power tools, shouted commands, and finally, a sudden silence followed by choked exclamations. "My God, we need medics down here now! They're alive! They're alive!" Amber's heart leaped. Ignoring the earlier instructions, she rushed back down to the basement. The scene she found would be seared into her memory forever. The east wall had been partially demolished, revealing a hidden room no more than 10 by 12 feet. The space was lit by a single low-wattage bulb. There were 2 thin mattresses on the floor, a bucket that clearly served as a toilet, and makeshift shelves holding canned goods and bottles of water. And there, squinting into the light pouring through the opening, were 4 emaciated figures. Gabriel Hernandez, his hair now completely gray, held protectively onto Elena, whose once beautiful face was etched with years of deprivation. Behind them, 2 teenagers, Gabriel, now 21, and Sofía, 18, clung to each other, their bodies thin and pale from lack of sunlight. "Thank you," Gabriel whispered, his voice hoarse, the first words he had spoken to a stranger in 9 years. "Thank you for finding us." Paramedics moved in quickly, assessing the family as they were carefully helped from their prison. They were malnourished, dehydrated, and showed signs of health issues from the prolonged confinement and lack of sun. But miraculously, they were alive. Amber, using her medical training, helped stabilize Sofía, who seemed to be in the worst condition. As she placed a thermal blanket around the young woman's shoulders, she noticed something disturbing. Old, faded scars on her wrists, evidence that she had once been chained. "Who did this to them?" she asked Officer Rivera in a low voice. He was supervising the operation with a grim expression. "We don't know for sure yet," he replied, "but we found this." He showed her a small notebook recovered from a hidden compartment in the secret room. In it, written in meticulous script, were detailed entries about the Hernandez family, feeding schedules, notes on their behavior, and a signature at the bottom of each page. Eduardo Vega, Rivera explained. Elena Hernandez's brother. He disappeared shortly after the family did. Everyone assumed he was also a victim of whatever happened to them. But he was the one holding them captive, Amber concluded, a wave of nausea washing over her. It looks that way. The question now is, where is he? As the Hernandez family was moved to ambulances, Amber noticed something in Elena's gaze. It wasn't just relief or trauma, it was fear, a sharp and persistent thing. "Will he come back?" Elena whispered as Amber drew near. "Eduardo always comes back." Before Amber could answer, the paramedics shut the ambulance doors and sped toward the hospital, leaving her alone in the front yard of what she now knew was a house of horrors. That night, as reporters swarmed the property and the flashing lights of patrol cars painted the neighborhood in strobing red and blue, Amber couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. From somewhere in the shadows, a pair of eyes tracked her every move. What none of them knew was that Eduardo Vega was not far. In fact, he had been closer than anyone could possibly imagine throughout the entire rescue operation, and he had no intention of letting his family be taken from him so easily. News of the Hernandez family's rescue spread like wildfire across the country. National media descended upon the quiet Coral Gables neighborhood, turning Amber's home into the epicenter of a story ripped from the most disturbing of nightmares. "Family found alive after 9 years, trapped in secret room," the headline screamed. Theories abounded, questions multiplied, but no one had more questions than Detective Lucia Ramirez, newly assigned to the case. 28 hours after the rescue, Ramirez stood in Jackson Memorial Hospital, where the Hernandez family was being treated. Her notebook was filled with notes, yet the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit. "I need to speak with them," she insisted to the doctors blocking the entrance to the family's room. "Eduardo Vega is still out there, and we need to find him before he disappears or worse, hurts someone else." Dr. Sanchez, a psychiatrist specializing in trauma, shook his head. "Detective, you must understand, these people have endured prolonged captivity. Their psychological state is extremely fragile. Miguel has barely spoken. Elena suffers panic attacks every time she hears footsteps in the hall. The children, well, they're not children anymore, but their development has been severely compromised. Which is precisely why we need to catch Vega," Ramirez countered, "so they can begin to heal." Finally, a compromise was reached. Ramirez could speak briefly with Elena, who had shown signs of being the most emotionally stable of the family. The room where Elena Hernandez was recovering was flooded with natural light, a cruel contrast to the darkness she had inhabited for nearly a decade. At 47, she looked 60. Her hair, once jet black according to file photos, was now almost entirely gray. Her hands, resting on the hospital blanket, bore the faint tracings of old scars. "Mrs. Hernandez," Ramirez began softly, "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about your brother." Elena looked up. Her eyes, sunken in darkened sockets, held an unfathomable pain. "Eduardo is not my brother," she said, her voice low but firm. "Not after what he did." Over the next hour, Elena recounted a story that chilled the blood. Eduardo, 7 years her junior, had always been a troubled child. Raised in Mexico City by severe parents, he developed a disturbing obsession with his older sister, whom he saw as his protector and sole ally. When I met Miguel and we decided to move to the United States, Eduardo lost his mind, Elena explained. He said I was abandoning him, that I was destroying our family. I tried to stay in touch. We even invited him to live with us when he turned 18. Eduardo moved in with them in 1990. At first, everything seemed to work. He got a job as a maintenance technician in an apartment building. He contributed to the household and seemed to get along with his niece and nephew. But gradually, his behavior grew more erratic. He started calling me at all hours at work. He would check my phone. He'd question Miguel about where we had been. Elena continued. One night, I heard a noise in our bedroom and found Eduardo going through our things. When I confronted him, he just said he was protecting us. Miguel asked him to leave. Eduardo seemed to take it calmly. Too calmly, in retrospect. He moved into a nearby apartment and kept his distance for a few months. Then in June of 1995, he showed up unexpectedly during a family dinner. He seemed different, Elena recalled, her voice cracking. Calm, almost serene. He said he'd been working on a special project and wanted to show us. Miguel always tried to encourage his positive interests, so we agreed to go to the basement where Eduardo said he had something to show us. What followed was a nightmare. Eduardo had secretly built a hidden room in the basement during his visits when the family was out. He lured them all inside and sealed the door, which he had designed to be invisible from the outside. He said we would be a real family now, Elena whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks, with no interference from the outside world. When Miguel tried to fight back, Eduardo hit him with a metal bar. He threatened to kill the children if we didn't cooperate. Ramirez wrote furiously. Every detail was crucial. How did he keep you captive for so long? Eduardo is methodical, Elena answered. He worked mostly at night, which gave him the freedom to visit us during the day when the neighbors were at work. He installed a basic ventilation system. He brought us food, water, just enough to keep us alive. If we tried to scream, he would threaten to hurt the children. And no one suspected a thing for 9 years, Ramirez murmured in disbelief. Eduardo is smart. After our disappearance, he supposedly moved to California. In reality, he rented an apartment a few blocks away and continued working his night shifts. Once the house was empty, he had complete access. He even installed hidden cameras to monitor if anyone came inside. What happened when Amber Collins bought the house? A flicker of hope sparked in Elena's face for the first time. She was our salvation. Eduardo panicked. His visits became erratic. He made mistakes. One night he forgot to fully latch the secret door. We heard Amber moving around the house and started making noise, praying she would hear us. Ramirez leaned forward. Elena, this is critical. Where do you think Eduardo might be now? The woman paled visibly. He has a place, she whispered. An abandoned warehouse near the port. He mentioned it when he was talking to himself, thinking we couldn't hear. He said it was his plan B if he ever lost us. As Ramirez stood to relay this vital information, Elena grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Detective! Her voice was barely audible. Eduardo won't stop. To him, we are his possessions, and now, Amber Collins is on his list too. He saw her as the intruder who destroyed his perfect family. At that exact moment, miles away, Amber Collins was returning home after being exhaustively questioned at the police station. Physically and emotionally drained, she didn't notice the figure watching her from a parked car across the street. Nor did she perceive that the back door, which she was certain she had locked that morning, was now slightly ajar. Amber Collins closed the front door behind her, letting out a long, weary sigh. The last 72 hours had been an emotional whirlwind. The discovery of the Hernandez family, the endless police interrogations, and the sudden media spotlight that turned every step outside her house into an ordeal. She dropped her purse on the entryway table and headed for the kitchen. She needed a hot tea and perhaps something stronger after that. The house, which she was only just beginning to feel was hers, now felt tainted by the horrors that had occurred within its walls. "I should just sell it," she muttered to herself as she filled the kettle. "Move into some anonymous apartment where no one knows who I am." A soft creak from the hallway cut through her thoughts. Amber froze the kettle halfway to the sink. In the days following the rescue, forensic technicians had combed over every inch of the house. They had assured her there were no more hidden compartments, no more secrets buried in the walls. But now, in the stillness of the late afternoon, something felt wrong. "Hello?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is anyone there?" Silence. "You're being paranoid," she told herself, but she still grabbed a large knife from the kitchen block before venturing toward the hall. The house was quiet, bathed in the golden afternoon light filtering through the blinds. Amber systematically checked each room on the first floor. The living room, the dining room, the small study. Everything seemed normal. At the foot of the stairs leading to the second floor, she hesitated. Part of her wanted to call the police immediately. Officer Ramirez had given her a personal number, insisting she call about anything suspicious. "Don't be ridiculous," she chided herself. "You can't call the police every time the house makes a noise." Clutching the knife, she started up the stairs. The second floor held 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Her room, at the end of the hall, had its door slightly ajar. Amber stopped. She was absolutely certain she had closed it that morning. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she slowly pushed the door open. The room looked untouched at first glance. The bed was made, the curtains drawn open, her laptop closed on the desk. But then she noticed the detail that sent a chill down her spine. Lying on her pillow was a photograph. Amber approached cautiously and picked it up with trembling hands. It was a picture of the Hernandez family, clearly taken during their captivity. Miguel, Elena, Gabriel, and Sofía were posed together in the secret room, their faces gaunt, their eyes empty. And at the edge of the frame, partially visible, was the hand of the person holding the camera. A hand wearing a distinctive silver ring with a black stone. On the back of the photo, written in meticulous script, were the words, "You ruined my family, now I'll ruin your life." The sound of the kettle whistling downstairs made Amber jump, and she dropped the photograph. Her pulse racing, she pulled out her phone and dialed Detective Ramirez's number. "Detective," she said the moment the call connected, her voice an urgent whisper. "I think Eduardo Vega has been in my house. He left a threat." "Where are you now?" Ramirez's voice was tense, professional. "I don't know. I just came in a few minutes ago and—" A sharp noise from downstairs cut her off. It sounded like someone had just shut a door. "Is someone here?" she whispered, terror lacing her voice. "Detective, is there someone in the house?" "Amber, listen to me very carefully." Ramirez's voice was now urgent. "Get out of the house immediately if you can do so safely. If not, hide and keep the line open. We're sending patrol cars right now." Amber looked toward her bedroom door. To get to the exit, she would have to go down the stairs, possibly right into the intruder. Her gaze darted to the window. From the second story, the jump would be dangerous, but not impossible. As she weighed her options, she heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, as if the person climbing had no reason to hurry, knowing their prey was cornered. In a split-second decision, Amber slid under the bed, pulling the knife and the phone with her. Through the line, she could hear Ramirez coordinating units. her voice a distant anchor as Amber held her breath. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing. They stopped outside her bedroom door. "Amber," a man's voice, soft and almost gentle, called from the doorway. "I know you're here. I can smell your perfume." Amber pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle any sound. From her position under the bed, she could see a pair of black boots step into the room. "Don't be afraid," the voice continued. "I just want to talk, to explain to you why what you did was wrong, why you shouldn't have interfered with my family." The boots moved slowly around the room, pausing occasionally. Amber watched as he bent down to pick up the fallen photograph. "Ah, you found my gift," he said with a soft chuckle that made Amber's skin crawl. "That was taken on a special day. Gabriel's 16th birthday. I made a cake. I sang to them. We're a family, you see, a real family. Not like these fake families that live apart, scattered, connected only by occasional phone calls and forced holiday gatherings." The boots moved toward the closet, which he threw open, then to the ensuite bathroom. Finally, they stopped in the center of the room. "Where are you, Amber?" His tone shifted, an edge of anger cutting through the false kindness. "Don't make this harder. We have so much to discuss." The phone in Amber's hand vibrated softly. A text from Ramirez. 2 minutes. Eduardo, because Amber was certain it was him, moved again, this time toward the bed. She felt the mattress dip as he sat down on it. "I know you're scared," he went on. "Everyone is always scared at first. Miguel, Elena, the children. They were all afraid. But then they understood. They understood that I did it for love. For protection. The outside world is a cruel place, Amber. It's full of danger, disappointment, betrayal, like your ex-husband, right? He hurt you. He betrayed you." Amber froze. How did he know about her divorce? "I've been watching you for longer than you think," he said, as if answering her unspoken question. "Ever since you first toured this house with that foolish real estate agent. I saw something in you, Amber. A loneliness. The same kind of loneliness I saw in my sister when we were children. The same kind I tried to cure by bringing our family together in a safe space away from the world." The boots moved again, and to her horror, Amber watched as Eduardo knelt, his face appearing at floor level as he peered under the bed. His eyes, a dark, almost black-brown, met hers. A slow smile spread across his face. "There you are," he whispered. Just then, the wail of police sirens shattered the afternoon silence, followed by the screech of tires on the asphalt in front of the house. Eduardo's smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold determination. He shot to his feet. "This isn't over," he said, his voice now as hard as steel. "A family is never truly apart, Amber. And now, you're part of mine." With those words, he ran from the room. Amber heard his hurried footsteps down the hall, followed by the sound of a window sliding open and shut. Seconds later, the house filled with the shouts of police officers announcing their presence. Amber scrambled out from under the bed just as Detective Ramirez entered the room, weapon drawn. "Are you all right?" the detective asked, her eyes scanning the room for threats. Amber nodded, too shocked to speak. "He went out the hall window," she finally managed to say. "But he said it's not over, that I'm part of his family now." Ramirez holstered her weapon and keyed her radio. "Suspect is on the run, possible exit from the rear of the property. Eduardo Vega, Hispanic male, approximately 40 years old. Consider him extremely dangerous." Turning back to Amber, the detective spoke gravely. "You can't stay here. It's too dangerous." As Amber was escorted from the house she once believed would be her new beginning, she couldn't shake the feeling that Eduardo Vega's eyes were still watching her, patiently waiting for his next chance. What none of them knew was that Eduardo hadn't fled far at all, and that his obsession, now divided between his family and the woman who had torn them apart, had only grown more dangerous. "I can't believe you let him get away," Captain Ortega snapped, his voice echoing through the precinct's conference room. "We had Miami's most wanted suspect cornered, and he vanished like a ghost." Detective Ramirez maintained her composure, though frustration was evident in the tight set of her jaw. It had been 3 days with no sign of Eduardo Vega. 3 days since he had broken into Amber Collins's home and disappeared before they could capture him. "Sir, we have checkpoints on every major road out of the city," she responded. "His picture is on every news channel. Airports, bus stations, and ports are on high alert." And still, nothing. The captain slumped into his chair, running a hand over his weary face. "This guy is no common criminal. He held a family captive for 9 years without anyone suspecting a thing. He has resources, intelligence, and apparently plenty of places to hide." The meeting was interrupted when a young officer hurried in, holding a file. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, clearly agitated, "but Vega's psychological profile just came in from the FBI along with the results from his apartment search." Ramirez took the file and opened it. Her expression darkened as her eyes flew across the pages. "What did they find?" the captain asked. "Worse than we thought." Ramirez laid several photographs on the table. They showed a meticulously organized apartment, its walls covered with pictures of the Hernandez family, taken throughout the years of their captivity. Vega kept a detailed journal. He called it the Family Chronicles. He recorded everything: what they ate, their conversations, even their sleep patterns. "Sick," Ortega muttered. "There's more," Ramirez continued, pointing to another image. They found a hidden room behind a wardrobe. Vega had built an exact replica of the room where he kept the Hernandez family, identical down to the last detail. Apparently, he spent hours in there imagining he was with them. She turned to another document, and the profile. The FBI classifies him as an obsessive kidnapper with a delusional disorder. His primary obsession is the concept of a perfect family, but his definition is severely distorted. For Vega, family perfection means total control, isolation, and absolute dependence. "And Amber Collins fits into this fantasy?" Ortega asked. "According to the profile, it's likely Vega sees her as an extension of his family, or possibly a replacement for Elena. Her recent divorce makes her a vulnerable figure in his mind, someone to be saved from the outside world." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Captain Ortega spoke. "What does the profile say about his next move?" Ramirez turned a page. "He will almost certainly try to reclaim his family. The hospital is the most likely target, but it's too heavily guarded. The FBI suggests he might seek leverage, a hostage, someone important to the Hernandez family or to Collins to force an exchange." "Who would that be?" "The Hernandezes have been isolated for 9 years. Just then, Ramirez's phone rang. She answered, listening intently, the color draining from her face. "Understood. We're on our way," she said before hanging up. Looking at the captain, she explained, "That was Dr. Sanchez from the hospital. Gabriel Hernandez has been receiving text messages from Eduardo." At Jackson Memorial Hospital, Gabriel Hernandez, 21 years old but emotionally stunted by his captivity, sat stiffly on his bed clutching a cell phone. "They started yesterday," he explained to Ramirez, his voice soft and trembling. "Messages from an unknown number. At first I thought it was a reporter, but then he told me who he was." Gabriel handed the phone to the detective. Her expression grew more severe as she scrolled through the conversation. "Hello, Gabriel. Miss me? I know you must be confused, but everything will be back to normal soon. Please leave us alone. We're safe now." "No one is safe in the outside world, Gabriel. I've explained this to you many times. People lie, they betray, they hurt. Remember how you cried when you were little, and I told you about the wars, the sickness, the cruelty that exists outside our sanctuary. Our home was safe. It wasn't a home. It was a prison. You'll soon understand I did the right thing. I always have. By the way, your new friend seems nice. I'm glad you're making connections so quickly. That last message had been sent just an hour ago, accompanied by a photograph that made Ramirez's heart stop. It showed a young hospital volunteer, Maria Delgado, who had been working closely with Gabriel and Sofía. The photo was clearly a candid shot, taken as she was leaving the hospital. "Where is Maria now?" Ramirez asked, already pulling out her radio. "She said she was going to the library to get some books and would be right back," Gabriel replied, fear stark in his eyes. "Detective, if Eduardo hurts her—" Ramirez was already in motion, barking orders to her team. "I need a unit at the Miami Public Library now. Possible hostage situation. Target is Maria Delgado, hospital volunteer, and I want security doubled here. Vega could be creating a diversion." Maria Delgado walked through the young adult section of the library, carefully selecting books she thought might interest Gabriel and Sofía. At 23, the psychology student had volunteered specifically for this case, moved by the Hernandez siblings' extraordinary situation. "They'll love The Little Prince," she murmured to herself, adding it to her growing pile. "It's perfect for exploring themes of isolation and rediscovering the world." She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't notice the man who had positioned himself at the end of the aisle, watching her. When she finally looked up, she started slightly. "Excuse me, you startled me," she said with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" The man, middle-aged and unremarkable, smiled back. Nothing about him suggested danger. He could have been a college professor or an office worker. "Actually, I think we can help each other, Maria," he replied, his voice soft and even. The fact that he knew her name sent an immediate alarm through Maria's mind. She took an instinctive step back. "Who are you?" she asked, her hand sliding toward the pocket where she kept her phone. "I'm Eduardo Vega," he answered casually, as if introducing himself at a social gathering. "And I truly admire the work you're doing with Gabriel and Sofía. It's important they have someone to guide them." Maria felt the air leave her lungs. She knew that name. All of Miami knew it. "Don't do anything foolish," Eduardo continued, noticing her panic. "I'm not here to hurt you, quite the opposite. I want you to help me understand something." "What?" Maria managed to ask, her voice a bare whisper. "Why does everyone insist that what I did was wrong?" His tone was genuinely curious, almost academic. "I protected my family from a horrible world. I gave them safety, routine, predictability. I read to them, taught them math, history. Did you know Sofía can recite every American president? I taught her that." Maria, trained in psychology, recognized the dangerous disconnect from reality in his words. She decided to play along while she assessed her options. "It must have been difficult taking care of all of them," she said cautiously. Eduardo's expression brightened. "Exactly. Someone who understands. It was an enormous sacrifice. I worked night shifts, slept only a few hours, all to keep them safe." He took a step toward her and she instinctively backed away. "But now they're confused," he continued, his expression clouding over. "They've been contaminated by outside ideas. I need your help to make them understand. They must come back. That they belong with our family." "And how could I help?" Maria asked, buying time, aware that every second she kept him talking increased her chances of being found. Eduardo smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "You're their connection to this new world. They respect you. They listen to you. You could help them see that everything I did was for love." At that moment, Maria saw movement in her peripheral vision. Silhouettes moving silently between the bookshelves. "Police." "Maybe you're right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Why don't you tell me more about your family so I can better understand? Eduardo's smile widened, but there was something calculating in his gaze now. You're smart, Maria, trying to distract me while your friends close in. With a shockingly fast movement, Eduardo pulled something from his pocket. It wasn't a weapon, but a small photograph which he dropped at her feet. Tell them this is only the beginning, he said, his voice suddenly cold. Tell them a family is never truly apart. Before Maria could react, Eduardo spun and disappeared through an emergency exit, triggering the alarm. When officers converged on the aisle seconds later, he was gone. Trembling, Maria picked up the photograph. It showed a woman asleep in what looked like a hotel room. It was Amber Collins, vulnerable and unaware she was being watched, and written on the back, in the same meticulous script, "Family always finds its way home." "How the hell did he get into my room?" Amber's voice trembled with a mixture of fear and fury as she stared at the photograph. "I was supposed to be under protection. I was supposed to be safe." Detective Ramirez maintained a calm exterior, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her own alarm. They were in a new hotel room, this one with 3 officers posted outside the door. "Technicians are reviewing the security footage from the other hotel," Ramirez explained. "There's no sign of Vega on any of the cameras. We're looking into the staff, but in the meantime, I wait for him to find me again." Amber paced the room, unable to stand still. "This isn't a life, Detective. I can't hide forever." Ramirez nodded slowly. "You're right, and I think it's time we changed our strategy." She pulled a folder from her briefcase. "The FBI has analyzed Vega's behavior. He's playing with us, proving he can get to anyone, anytime." "So what are you proposing?" "A lure," Ramirez answered directly. "But not just any lure, one that Eduardo can't possibly resist." In a private room at Jackson Memorial Hospital, the Hernandez family met Amber Collins for the first time. The meeting, carefully orchestrated by Ramirez, was tense but necessary. Miguel Hernandez, his hair now completely gray, reached out a trembling hand toward Amber. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice hoarse from years of disuse. "We can never repay you." Elena, sitting beside him, nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. Gabriel and Sofía stood slightly apart, watching with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "You don't have to thank me," Amber replied, deeply moved. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Elena interjected, speaking for the first time. "Not everyone would have listened. Not everyone would have believed." Ramirez, observing from a corner, stepped forward. "We need to discuss the plan. As I've explained, Eduardo is still an active threat to all of you, but especially to Amber and to the volunteers who have been working with Gabriel and Sofía." "Like Maria," Gabriel said quietly. Is she okay?" "She's safe," Ramirez assured him. But Eduardo was using her to send a message. He's obsessed with the idea of reuniting his family as he defines it. And now, that definition seemed to include Amber. "He'll never stop," Elena said, a visible shiver running through her. "I know him better than anyone. For Eduardo, this isn't a crime or an obsession, it's a sacred mission." "Which is why we need your help," Ramirez continued. "Specifically yours. Elena, you're the key to Eduardo's psychology. Everything he's done in his twisted mind has been for you." Elena paled. "What do you want me to do?" "We want to use the connection Eduardo feels with you to draw him out. A public message, from sister to brother." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Miguel took his wife's hand. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," he said firmly. "You've suffered enough." Elena looked at her husband, then at her children, and finally at Amber. When she spoke again, her voice held a resolve that surprised everyone. "I'll do it. It's time for this to end." The press conference was arranged in less than 24 hours. Major local and national media outlets filled the Miami Police Department's conference room. The Hernandez story had captured the nation's attention. A saga of horror, survival, and now, the hunt for a man who defied all normal notions of obsession and control. Elena Hernandez, dressed simply but elegantly, sat beside Detective Ramirez. Behind them, discreetly positioned, were several FBI agents, including the criminal profiler Dr. Marcus Reed. When the cameras began their live broadcast, Elena looked directly into the lens, imagining she was staring into her brother's eyes. "Eduardo," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, "I know you're watching this. I know that in some way you believe what you did was for love, for protection, for family." She paused, taking a deep breath. "For 9 years, you kept us locked in the dark. You watched my children grow up in captivity. You watched my husband lose hope. You watched me, your sister, become a shadow of who I once was." The cameras captured every expression, every subtle shift on her face as she relived the trauma. "But we are free now, Eduardo, and we are not going back. Not to that darkness, not to that life that was no life at all." Elena leaned forward slightly, her intensity growing. "However, there is one thing I do want back. One thing you took from me that is priceless." This part of the speech had been carefully crafted by Ramirez and the FBI team. They needed an irresistible lure, something Eduardo could not ignore. "The medal of the Virgin of Guadalupe that our mother gave me. The one I always wore. The one you took the night you locked us away. I know you still have it, Eduardo. I know what it means to you." The FBI analysts had found multiple references to this medal in Eduardo's journals. It was an object of profound sentimental significance, a symbol of the bond between the siblings and their late mother. "Tomorrow, at 10 in the morning, I will be in Bicentennial Park, by the statue of Ponce de Leon, alone. If you truly love me, if there is anything left of the brother I once knew, you will return that last link to our mother to me." Detective Ramirez then took the microphone, her expression professional and controlled. "Mr. Vega will not be arrested during this exchange should he choose to appear. We want a peaceful resolution, an opportunity for him to prove that, as he claims, his actions were motivated by family love." It was a lie, of course. Snipers would be strategically positioned around the park. Undercover agents would blend in with the passers-by. The trap was set. When the press conference ended, Ramirez escorted Elena back to a private room where Miguel and their children were waiting. Amber was also there under strict protection. "You did perfectly," Ramirez assured her. "Now we just have to wait." But as the others discussed the details of the next day's plan, Sofía Hernández, 18 years old but with a wisdom born of suffering, quietly approached Amber. "It won't work," she whispered, making sure only Amber could hear. "Why do you say that?" Amber asked, startled. Sophia's eyes, so much like her mother's but with a flicker of something darker, something forged in captivity, fixed on Amber's. "Because I know Uncle Eduardo better than anyone. He used to spend hours talking to me when the others were asleep. He told me his secrets, his plans, his fears." A chill ran down Amber's spine. "What kind of secrets?" "Like the place he would go if we were ever separated," Sofía continued. "It's not the port warehouse my mother told the police about. That was just a decoy in case one of us tried to escape and turn him in." "Sofía!" Amber struggled to remain calm, aware of the gravity of what she was hearing. "Do you know where Eduardo really is?" The young woman nodded slowly. "Yes, and I know he won't go to the park tomorrow. He's not that stupid, but he will come tonight for you. For me? How can you be so sure? Because he's chosen you, Sofía replied with an unsettling certainty. I saw it in his eyes when he visited the house after you bought it. He was watching you, studying you. For Eduardo, you're the missing piece in his new plan. What plan? Amber's voice was barely a whisper now. A new family, Sofía said. With me as his favored daughter, and you as my mother's replacement. Before Amber could fully process this horrifying revelation, a sudden crash shook the building. The lights flickered once, twice, and then plunged the hospital into absolute darkness. Everyone on the ground now! Ramirez's voice cut through the confusion, but it was too late. In the ensuing chaos, no one immediately noticed that Amber Collins and Sofía Hernández were gone. I want every available officer in this hospital. No one in, no one out, without being identified. Detective Ramirez's voice boomed through the corridors as the emergency generator finally kicked in, bathing the hallways in an eerie yellowish glow. Miguel Hernández was in shock, holding Elena, who looked as if she might faint. Gabriel, frozen beside them, kept repeating, Sofía knew. Sofía always knew. What do you mean? Ramirez turned to him, catching his words. Sofía, she was always different after he locked us up, Gabriel explained, his voice breaking. Eduardo spent more time with her than with any of us. He brought her special gifts, books, candy. Sometimes he would take her out of the room for hours. Elena let out a gut-wrenching sob at these words. She never told us what they did during that time, Gabriel continued. But when she came back, it was as if a part of her had stayed with him. Ramirez processed this new information rapidly, the pieces clicking into a disturbing pattern. Are you suggesting Sofía might be cooperating with Eduardo? I don't know, Gabriel answered honestly, but for the last few days I saw her watching the news about him with a strange expression, not fear, something else. A young officer ran up. Detective, we have the security footage from the moment of the blackout. There's something you need to see. In the small hospital security room, Ramirez and Dr. Reed watched the video sequence with growing dread. The cameras had captured the exact moment. Sofía whispering something to Amber, then the blackout, when the battery-powered backup cameras activated seconds later. They clearly showed Sofía leading Amber down a service corridor, not fleeing from something, but deliberately heading somewhere. It wasn't a kidnapping, Reed murmured. Sofía was leading her. But to what, and why would Amber go with her willingly? Ramirez questioned. The answer came from an unexpected source. Maria Delgado, the volunteer who had encountered Eduardo at the library, entered the room. Stockholm Syndrome, she said with the authority of her psychology training. But with a twist. Eduardo didn't just hold this family captive. He created an entire world for them. A world where he was the protector, the provider, the only constant. Are you saying Sofía developed a loyalty to her captor? Ramirez asked. It's more complex, Maria explained. Sofía was only 9 when her captivity began. The most formative years of her life were spent under Eduardo's influence. To her, the reality he built might feel more normal than our world, which must seem chaotic and overwhelming. Reed nodded in understanding. And what if Eduardo offered her a role in his new family? A role of power or privilege? Exactly, Maria confirmed, for a young woman who has lived with no control over her own life. That offer could be irresistible. Ramirez turned back to the screens, watching as Sofía and Amber disappeared through a service door that led to the hospital's underground parking garage. We need to know where she took them, she declared, and we need to know now. Amber Collins regained consciousness slowly, her mind fighting through a thick fog. The last thing she remembered was Sofía whispering about Eduardo's plan. Then the lights going out, and Sofía pulling at her hand, urging her to follow for safety. "Detective Ramirez is waiting for us in the basement," Sofía had said. "It's a prepared evacuation route." Amber had followed, trusting the young woman. In the dark service corridor, she didn't see the cloth that covered her mouth and nose, didn't register the sweet scent of chloroform until it was too late. Now, as her senses gradually returned, Amber tried to get her bearings. She was lying on a narrow but surprisingly comfortable bed. The room was small but clean, with wood-paneled walls and a window covered by thick curtains that blocked nearly all outside light. A table lamp cast a soft amber glow. She tried to move and found that while she wasn't tied up, her body felt heavy, likely a residual effect of the sedative. "You're awake." Sophia's soft voice came from a corner of the room. The young woman was sitting in a chair, watching her with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry about the chloroform. Eduardo said it was the only way." "Sofía." Amber tried to keep her voice calm despite the rising panic. "Where are we? Why did you do this?" "We're safe," Sofía answered simply. "In Eduardo's special place. The one I never told my mother or the police about." "Why, Sofía?" Amber asked, trying to sit up. "Your family is desperate to find you. They love you." A shadow crossed the young woman's face. "They love me, but they don't understand me. They never will." She stood and walked to the bed, perching on the edge. "Do you know what the hardest part of being free is? Everyone expects us to be grateful. Traumatized, yes, but fundamentally grateful to be back in the real world." "Aren't you?" Amber asked, genuinely confused. Sofía smiled, a sad, knowing smile that seemed out of place on her young face. "The real world is loud, chaotic, unpredictable. For 9 years, every day was exactly the same. We knew when we would eat, when we would sleep, what we would read. There were no decisions to make, no uncertainties." "That's not freedom, Sofía." "And what is freedom?" the young woman retorted. "Being constantly bombarded with choices, worrying about the future, about money, about relationships. I'm 18 years old chronologically, but what do I know about the world? How am I supposed to function in it?" Amber was beginning to understand the depth of the psychological damage Eduardo had inflicted. "Eduardo understands me," Sofía continued. "He always has. While my parents and Gabriel dreamed of escape, I learned to adapt. Eduardo saw that. He taught me things he didn't teach them. History, science, philosophy. He manipulated you," Amber said gently. "Maybe," Sofía conceded, surprising Amber. "But he also gave me something no one else could. Predictability, safety." The sound of a door opening somewhere nearby made both women tense. Firm footsteps approached down a hallway. "He's here," Sofía said, standing up. "Please, Amber, don't make him angry. He isn't violent by nature, but he becomes unstable when things are outside of his control." The bedroom door swung open, revealing Eduardo Vega. In person, he was surprisingly ordinary, medium height, slender build, with neatly combed black hair showing a few specks of gray at the temples. He wore a light blue Oxford shirt and khaki pants, like a university professor or an accountant. Only his eyes, intense and calculating, betrayed the disturbed mind behind the normal facade. He smiled as if he were a host greeting an expected guest. "You're finally awake. I hope Sofía made you comfortable." "Where are we?" Amber asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "At my cabin," Eduardo replied matter-of-factly. "Or rather, my great-uncle's cabin. It's about 50 miles north of Miami in a fairly isolated area. No one will bother us here." He walked over and sat in the chair Sofía had just vacated. The young woman remained standing by the door, watching the interaction intently. "I know you must have many questions," Eduardo continued. and I will answer all of them in due time, but first I'd like to explain why you are here. Because you kidnapped me, Amber answered with more courage than she felt. Eduardo waved a dismissive hand. Such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as a rescue, the same way I rescued my family 9 years ago. Rescued? You held them prisoner against their will. I protected them, Eduardo corrected, his tone still gentle but with a sharp edge. From the pain, the uncertainty, the chaos of the outside world. Do you know how many murders occurred in Miami during those 9 years? How many accidents? How many tragedies did my family avoid, all thanks to me? Amber decided to change her tactics. And why me? Why not just disappear after they found you? Eduardo exchanged a look with Sofía before answering. Because you are special, Amber. I knew it the moment I saw you touring the house. You have a void in you, a yearning. The same one I saw in Helena when we were young. You don't know anything about me, Amber protested. I know your husband betrayed you, Eduardo replied softly. I know you work double shifts as a nurse, caring for strangers with no one to care for you. I know you bought that house hoping for a fresh start. But what you were really looking for was an escape. A wave of nausea washed over Amber. The fact that he knew these intimate details of her life was sickening. I've been watching you for months, he continued, even before you discovered my family. I saw your potential. Potential for what? Amber asked, though she dreaded the answer. To be part of something better, something purer. Eduardo leaned forward, his intensity growing. The original experiment failed because I tried to keep a family intact that was already contaminated by the outside world. Miguel and Elena never fully adapted. Even Gabriel resisted in his own way. He glanced at Sofía, his pride evident. But Sofía understood. She grew up in the system I created, and she flourished. And now you want to start over, Amber concluded, the pieces clicking into a horrifying pattern. With me and Sofía. Not just the two of you, Eduardo corrected. A family needs balance. It needs structure. He stood and walked toward the door. There's someone else I want you to meet. He opened the door and called out softly. To Amber's horror, another figure appeared in the doorway, one she recognized immediately. Maria Delgado, the hospital volunteer, stepped into the room. She didn't seem to be under duress. There was no fear in her eyes, only the same strange calm Amber had seen in Sofía. Hello, Amber, Maria said with a serene smile. Welcome to the family. Detective Ramirez stared at the map spread across the operations table, where dozens of red pins marked possible locations where Eduardo Vega could be hiding Amber and Sofía. The FBI had expanded the search to a 100-kilometer radius around Miami, focusing on isolated properties, cabins, and abandoned structures. We have another problem, Captain Ortega announced, entering the room with a grim expression. Maria Delgado is missing. The volunteer? Ramirez looked up, alarmed. When was she last seen? She left the hospital during the confusion of the blackout, Ortega replied. Her car is still in the parking lot. Her phone is off. 3 women, Ramirez murmured. What is Vega building? A whole new family? Dr. Reed, who had been reviewing the journals confiscated from Eduardo's apartment, approached with an open notebook. I think I have something, he said, pointing to a specific page. Eduardo wrote extensively about his contingency plans if he were ever discovered. He mentioned something called Project Ark, his vision of a purified family. Purified? Ramirez asked. In his distorted mind, Eduardo believes he's saving these people from the corruption of the outside world, Reed explained. And there are several references to an inherited property, a place he describes as the final sanctuary. Does it say where this sanctuary is? Not directly, but there are clues. Reed flipped through a few pages. He mentions a lake, pine trees, and that it belonged to a great uncle. He also writes about how much he loved visiting the place as a child before he emigrated from Mexico. Ramirez turned to the officer coordinating with property records. I need everything you have on properties in the name of any extended family of Eduardo Vega or Elena Hernandez. Focus on wooded areas with lakes north of Miami. We're on it, the officer replied. But the older records aren't digitized. It's going to take time. Time we don't have, Ramirez muttered, turning her attention back to the map. Gabriel Hernandez, who had insisted on staying at the station during the search, approached the table timidly. Detective, he said in a low voice, I think I know where Uncle Eduardo might be. Back in the cabin, Amber was trying to process Maria's presence. The young volunteer who had seemed so dedicated to helping the Hernandez family was now sitting calmly across from her, as if being in the company of a kidnapper was perfectly normal. I don't understand, Amber said finally. Maria, you're a psychologist. You know exactly what Eduardo is doing, how he can manipulate people. Maria smiled gently. It is precisely because I study psychology that I can see the beauty in what Eduardo is building here. Beauty. Amber couldn't believe what she was hearing. You see beauty in kidnapping people and holding them prisoner? It's more complex than that, Eduardo intervened, having observed the interaction with scientific interest. Maria understands what many cannot, that total freedom is an illusion and often a burden. Maria nodded. Modern society has created a paradox. We have more choices than ever, yet we are more unhappy, more anxious, more depressed. The excess of choice paralyzes us and makes us constantly doubt our decisions. What I offer, Eduardo continued, is an alternative, a structured existence where basic needs are met and the difficult decisions are already made for you. Amber looked from Maria to Sofía, trying to understand how two intelligent women could have been so profoundly manipulated. And you, she asked Maria directly, how did he convince you? When he found you in the library, you looked terrified. I was at first, Maria admitted. But Eduardo didn't kidnap me that day. He gave me a choice. He asked me to investigate for myself, to read his writings, to consider his ideas. And you just accepted? Not immediately, Maria replied. But I was intrigued. As a psychology student, I've always been fascinated by human behavior in extreme situations. Eduardo offered me access to his journals, to his observations of the Hernandez family over 9 years. A case study without precedent. Academic curiosity turned into something more, Eduardo added with pride. Maria began to see the value in my work. Amber realized with a sinking horror that Maria showed no signs of coercion or fear. Her participation seemed genuinely voluntary. So what's the plan? Amber asked, trying to buy time as she assessed her escape options. Keep us here forever? For now, this is a temporary refuge, Eduardo explained. A place for us to get to know one another, and for you, Amber, to begin your transition. Transition? From chaos to order, Eduardo answered simply. From fear to security, from isolation to family. He rose and walked to a small bookshelf in the corner of the room, from which he retrieved a leather-bound notebook. This is your journal, he said, offering it to her. Each day you will write your thoughts, your questions, your doubts, and each day we will discuss them. It is the same process I used with Sofía and more recently with Maria. Amber took the notebook mechanically, her mind racing. She needed to feign cooperation if she was to have any chance of escape. And if I don't want to participate? She asked, testing the boundaries. Eduardo sighed like a patient teacher with a stubborn student. Amber, there are no locked doors here, no chains, no handcuffs. You are free to leave at any time. The answer surprised her. Really? Of course. Eduardo smiled. But first, allow me to show you something. He gestured toward the window. Sofía stepped forward and drew back the curtains, revealing a wooded landscape illuminated by the fading light of dusk. A beautiful lake shimmered in the distance. We are more than 15 kilometers from the nearest town, Eduardo explained. No main roads, no cell signal, and with Florida's coldest winters setting in, a walk without proper preparation would be challenging. The implied threat was crystal clear. She could try to escape, but the odds of surviving in the wilderness were minimal. For now, Eduardo continued, his tone once again gentle, I suggest you rest. Sofía will show you the rest of the cabin when you are ready. We will have dinner at 7 o'clock sharp. With that, Eduardo left the room, leaving Amber with Sofía and Maria. As soon as the door closed, Amber turned on them. Don't you see how sick all of this is? We have to get out of here. Maria exchanged a look with Sofía before answering. Amber, I understand your reaction. I went through that initial phase of resistance myself. But I would advise you to at least listen, to observe. There is no rush. No rush? Amber repeated, incredulous. The police must be frantically searching for us. That is precisely why we must remain here for a while, Sofía explained with a disturbing logic. Until the initial search dies down, Eduardo is very meticulous about security. Amber studied both women, searching for any sign that they were acting under duress, some secret message in their eyes, but all she saw was a quiet, firm conviction. Maria tried again, appealing to the professional in her. You know this is Stockholm Syndrome. You've studied it. You recognize it. What I recognize, Maria replied with surprising clarity, is that our diagnostic categories are sometimes gross oversimplifications of complex human experiences. Is it truly pathological to find comfort in structure, in certainty? It's pathological when it involves kidnapping and psychological manipulation, Amber insisted. Sofía, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Amber, there's something you should know about Maria. Maria nodded, as if giving permission. Sofía continued. Maria is not just here as a psychology student fascinated by the case. She's here because she has known Eduardo for a very long time. What? Amber felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Maria is Eduardo's niece, Sofía explained. His younger brother is Maria's father. She grew up hearing stories about her misunderstood uncle. When we were found in the house, Maria volunteered specifically to get close to us, to understand Eduardo's side of the story. Amber stared at Maria with renewed horror. It was all a lie? Your concern for the Hernandezes? Your desire to help them? No, Maria replied with apparent sincerity. I genuinely wanted to help them, and I still do. But my definition of help evolved as I came to understand Eduardo's vision more deeply. You're a family of lunatics, Amber muttered, fear transforming into anger. Maria didn't seem offended. Madness is often a label we apply to ideas that challenge our fundamental assumptions. The great visionaries throughout history were considered mad in their time. Eduardo is not a visionary, Amber retorted. He's a kidnapper, an abuser, and a manipulator. I suggest you judge that for yourself, Maria said, rising to her feet. Now, would you like to see the rest of the cabin? The library is particularly impressive. Amber realized that for the moment her best strategy was to feign cooperation while she searched for an opportunity to escape. With a reluctant nod, she followed Sofía and Maria out of the room, memorizing every detail of the layout, every window, every possible exit. What she didn't know was that Gabriel Hernandez at that very moment was leading Detective Ramirez directly to them, finally remembering the lake and the cabin Eduardo had mentioned so many times during his captivity. And what none of them knew was that Eduardo Vega had one final contingency plan, one that would transform his family project into something far darker if he felt cornered. The police convoy moved silently down the narrow forest road, headlights off, only the silver light of the full moon illuminating their path. In the lead vehicle, Detective Ramirez studied the crude map Gabriel had drawn from memory. "It should be just after this next curve," Gabriel whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. Eduardo used to describe it as the last refuge of purity in a contaminated world. Ramirez signaled for the convoy to halt. From this point on, they would proceed on foot to minimize the risk of alerting Eduardo. SWAT snipers were already fanning out into the perimeter, seeking elevated positions that would give them a line of sight on the cabin. "Remember," Ramirez briefed her team, "we have 3 potential hostages: Amber Collins, Sofía Hernández, and Maria Delgado. Their safety is the priority. Eduardo Vega is to be considered extremely dangerous, but we will attempt a non-lethal resolution if possible." Gabriel, who had insisted on accompanying them despite objections, approached Ramirez. "There's something you should know about the cabin," he said in a low voice. "Eduardo always talked about a final plan if he was ever discovered. A cellar, a place where he could disappear with his family if he had to." Ramirez's face darkened as she understood the implication. "Do you think he would hurt them?" "Not intentionally," Gabriel replied. "In his twisted mind, he thinks he's protecting them. But if he feels cornered," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Ramirez keyed her radio. "All units be advised, possible last stand situation. Proceed with extreme caution." Inside the cabin, Amber maintained a neutral expression as she sat for dinner with her captors. The table was elegantly set with fine china and candles, a strange parody of a normal family meal. Eduardo sat at the head with Sofía to his right and Maria to his left. Amber sat opposite him, studying every detail of the room, searching for any potential advantage. During the tour of the cabin, her suspicions had been confirmed. All the windows had discreet but solid iron bars camouflaged as decorative elements. The exterior doors had multiple locks, and most disturbingly, she had noted security cameras in every room, their tiny lenses almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. "Are you enjoying the dinner, Amber?" Eduardo asked pleasantly, as if he were the host of an ordinary social gathering. "It's delicious," she replied, forcing a smile. "I didn't know you were such a good cook." "There are many things you don't yet know about me," Eduardo smiled, pleased with her apparent cooperation. "In time we will come to know each other deeply, no secrets, no barriers, like a real family." Amber noticed Sofía and Maria exchange a glance, as if sharing a private knowledge. Something in their dynamic had shifted over the last few hours, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. "Eduardo," Maria began, her tone carefully modulated, "I think we should show Amber the library after dinner. The philosophical texts you mentioned might help her better understand our mission." "An excellent idea," Eduardo agreed with a nod. "Education is fundamental to our community. Knowledge dispels fear." As the conversation continued, Amber noticed something out the window, a momentary glint almost imperceptible in the woods. It could have been the moon reflecting on water, an animal on the move, or the metallic gleam of a weapon. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression impassive. If the police had found the cabin, she needed to keep Eduardo distracted and calm. "I'd love to hear more about your philosophy, Eduardo," she said, leaning forward with feigned interest. "How did this all begin? When did you realize the outside world was so damaging?" The question struck a chord. Eduardo set down his silverware, his eyes lighting up with an almost religious fervor. "It began when I was a boy in Mexico City," he recounted. My father was a violent, unpredictable man. Every day was a Russian roulette of his moods and their consequences. Elena, being 7 years my senior, became my protector, my constant. Amber listened intently, as much to buy time as to understand the mind of her captor. When Helena met Miguel and decided to move to the United States, I felt my world collapse. My only source of stability was vanishing. I begged them to take me with them, and eventually they agreed. Eduardo paused, his eyes losing focus slightly as he drifted into memory. At first I tried to adapt. I truly did. But gradually I saw how the outside world corrupted Helena. How worries about money, status, the opinions of others transformed her into someone I no longer recognized. Amber saw another movement through the window, more defined this time, silhouettes moving between the trees. That was when I had my epiphany, Eduardo continued, oblivious to the events unfolding outside. True freedom is not found in having infinite choices, but in being free from the need to constantly choose. In a controlled environment where needs are met and decisions are simplified, the human spirit can finally flourish, free from the distractions of the modern world. And that's why you built the secret room, Amber prompted, keeping the conversation alive. Exactly, a sanctuary, a purified space where we could exist without the toxins of society. As Eduardo spoke, Amber noticed something even more unsettling. Sofía and Maria had begun to move in a coordinated, almost imperceptible way. Sofía reached for the wine bottle, pouring more into Eduardo's glass. Maria dropped her napkin, and as she bent to retrieve it, she seemed to adjust something beneath the table. A plan was in motion, and Amber didn't know if she was an ally or a target. Suddenly, a shrill sound pierced the air, the security alarm. Eduardo went rigid, his face instantly transforming from philosophical to alert. "They've found us," he said with a chilling calm, rising from the table. "Activate the ARC protocol." Now, to Amber's surprise, it was Maria who responded. "No, Eduardo, not this time." Eduardo turned to his niece, confusion momentarily replacing his determination. "What does that mean?" "It means," Sofía interjected, also standing, "that this ends today." Eduardo's face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. "You too, Sofía. After everything I've done for you, I chose you. I showed you the truth." "You showed me your truth," Sofía corrected, her voice firmer than Amber had ever heard it. "A truth built on control and fear." "Fear?" Eduardo nearly spat the word. "I protected you from fear. I gave you certainty in a chaotic world. You gave us a prison." Sophia's voice trembled now, not with fear but with contained emotion. "A beautiful, meticulously designed prison, but a prison nonetheless." Eduardo lunged for a panel on the wall, but Maria was faster. She blocked his path, holding what looked like a small taser. "I'm sorry, Uncle," she said with genuine sorrow. "I can't let you keep hurting people, not them and not yourself." Amber, finally understanding what was happening, rose slowly to her feet. "You planned this?" Maria nodded, never taking her eyes off Eduardo. "When he contacted me after the Hernandez rescue, I saw an opportunity. As a psychologist in training, I knew Eduardo would never seek help voluntarily. But I also knew I couldn't abandon my uncle no matter what he'd done. So you infiltrated," Amber concluded. "You pretended to agree with him. And she contacted me," Sofía added. "Maria explained her plan. I didn't trust her at first, but when she described how Eduardo had manipulated her for years, through letters and calls, I recognized the pattern." "Traitors," Eduardo hissed, his calm facade crumbling completely. "The outside world has already corrupted you. I've lost you." The cabin lights flickered and voices could be heard outside, orders being shouted. The police were about to breach. Eduardo, in a desperate move, lunged toward a nearby drawer. Maria tried to stop him, but he shoved her aside with surprising force. When he straightened, he was holding something in his hand. Not a weapon, as Amber initially feared, but a small remote control. "If I can't save you," he said, his voice breaking, "at least I can save us from the world that comes next." Amber saw the terror in Maria's eyes. "Eduardo, no! The basement is filled with gas!" In that instant, the cabin's front door burst open. Detective Ramirez entered first, weapon drawn, followed by SWAT officers. "Drop the device, Vega," Ramirez commanded. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Eduardo, a strange, peaceful smile on his face, began to press the button. Sofía launched herself at him in a desperate attempt to stop him. Maria screamed a warning, and Amber, acting on pure instinct, grabbed the heavy wine bottle from the table and threw it with all her strength. The bottle struck Eduardo's hand, sending the remote flying across the room. Before he could recover, 3 officers pinned him to the floor. "Amber!" Ramirez rushed to her side. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she replied, her body trembling with adrenaline. "But you need to know, there's gas in the basement. He was planning to blow us all up." "Fire team is on the way," Ramirez spoke quickly into her radio. "Possible gas leak. Evacuate the area immediately." As officers led a handcuffed Eduardo away, he kept his eyes fixed on Sofía and Maria. There was no hatred in his gaze, only a deep, unsettling sadness. "I just wanted to protect you," he said softly. "From the pain, the chaos, the world." "I know, Uncle," Maria replied with genuine compassion. "And now, we'll protect you. You'll get the help you need." Outside, under the starry sky, Amber, Sofía, and Maria sat together in the back of an ambulance, thermal blankets draped over their shoulders. Gabriel had come running the moment he saw his sister, hugging her so tightly he nearly knocked her over. "How did you know where to find us?" Sofía asked, still processing everything. "I remembered," Gabriel answered simply. "I remembered all the stories Eduardo told about this place, his final refuge." As the siblings reconnected, Amber turned to Maria. "Why didn't you tell me your plan? Why let me believe you were really on his side?" Maria offered a sad smile. "Because Eduardo is extremely perceptive. If you had acted any differently around me or Sofía, he would have noticed. Your genuine fear, your confusion, that was our best protection." Ramirez approached, tucking her notebook away after taking preliminary statements. "The fire team has secured the cabin. They found enough propane stored in the basement to level the entire structure. Eduardo had a fully equipped underground bunker apparently designed for a family reset." "What will happen to him now?" Amber asked, glancing toward the squad car where Eduardo waited, his figure barely visible through the fogged-up window. "Full psychiatric evaluation, then trial," Ramirez replied. "But with all of your testimonies plus the physical evidence, he'll spend the rest of his life in a maximum security institution." Sofía, having finished talking with her brother, joined them. "It's not just about punishment," she said with a wisdom that transcended her years. "Eduardo needs help, the same help we'll all need to process this." Amber nodded, feeling the weight of events finally settle upon her. "How do you rebuild your life after something like this?" "One day at a time," Maria answered, her psychology training blending with her personal experience. "With support, with time, with the freedom to heal at your own pace." "Freedom," Amber repeated, the word taking on a profound new meaning after her ordeal. True freedom. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to break, bathing the lake in shades of gold and rose. A new day, a new beginning. As the police convoy prepared to leave, taking everyone back to Miami, Amber took one last look at the cabin that had almost become her prison. She made a silent promise to herself. She would not let this experience define or diminish her. She would use what she had learned to help others, perhaps by working with survivors of similar traumas. Eduardo had been wrong in his methods, but he had identified a fundamental truth. We all crave safety, structure, and connection. The difference lay in how we seek to fulfill those needs, through control and isolation, or through shared vulnerability and mutual support. As the sun rose fully over the trees, illuminating the road back to Miami, Amber allowed herself, for the first time since her rescue, to feel something like hope. For the Hernandez family, for Maria, for herself. And perhaps even for Eduardo, this was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter.